Hi, my name is Christopher Westfall. I'm an insurance agent and I make no apologies for it. I help seniors and have for the last 20 years. I help them with their Medicare insurance to make sure that they have peace of mind and no huge cost to deal with. There's a doctor out there on YouTube telling people that they don't need any insurance on top of Medicare, that suddenly the 20% that they're going to have to pay with no cap on it is no big deal. Well, I've got evidence to the contrary. I want to share that with you today as you're making your decision potentially on whether or not to get any insurance at all to supplement Medicare. The first is a story from Philly.com. This story was shared with me from another agent. It was a really good expose on the benefits of having a Medicare supplement policy. It follows this 87-year-old lady right here as she was discharged from Abington Memorial Hospital after a hip fracture, and based on that she also had an arm fracture. She could not stand up very well, so she had to go to rehab after the hospital. I'm going to put a link to this story in the video so you can read it in its entirety, but I'm going to skip down to page 8 of the story and see how she made out upon her discharge from the hospital. This is not a unique story. We hear these stories all the time. So how did she come out of it? Let me zoom in. She left the hospital and the hospital billed Medicare. The primary diagnosis was loss of consciousness, and so Medicare, this is just on her check-in into the hospital. Medicare paid $37.44. So the Part A deductible of Medicare applies here. She has to pay that. Now it's $1,200. At the point this happened, it was $1,100. So she'd been paying for her Medicare supplemental policy, and it covered the cost of Part A. But wait, there's more. She went into skilled nursing facility after that. She was discharged into rehab. And so the total was, well, let me go back up here and show you this. Based on her discharge, she went into rehab for 77 days. 77 days. She got her strength back, went back to her apartment by her 87th birthday, and then her bills started to come in. The total bill for rehab alone was $37,776. The total payment from Medicare was $29,000. Her supplement paid an additional $7,837, leaving her to pay zero. See, she'd been making her Medicare supplement payments all along, so she would have this peace of mind and not have to pay the $7,800 here, plus the $1,100 here, all for this same incident. Oh, and by the way, her ambulance ride was covered by her Medicare supplement policy also. So as we look at this doctor who's out there telling people that they don't need a Medicare supplement, that there's no reason to have that the 20% of the bill is no big deal, let me cite something on his own webpage to bring some clarity to what he said. He talks about cancer and chemotherapy and how much it might cost you. Now remember, without a supplement, you have to pay 20% of the bill, and there is no maximum out of pocket. There's no cap, there's no ceiling, there's no limit. So 20% of each and every bill having to do with Part B services, you have to pay. And by the way, other things too, like if you leave the country, Medicare has no coverage for you, but the supplement on Plan F or Plan G would have coverage for you. So supplement's more important than he even alludes to here. But let's just look at his numbers, okay? And he's talking about chemotherapy, typical patient having to pay, in this example that he shows here on the screen, $269.97 per treatment. Now, if you had to pay that per treatment, I don't think many seniors on a fixed income, especially making $1,300 or $1,500 on Social Security, would think that that's no big deal, as the doctor does. He talks about another patient here. He said this patient received 2 anti-cancer drugs, and the bill was $7,700. Medicare paid 80%. The 20% of the portion was $269.97 per treatment. And then he talks about another patient. More expensive drug, medications are newer, so here's an example of that. So her portion was $400 per treatment. Here's another one. The treatment was Avastin, a biologic agent, one of the newer drugs, which means it's new. They're using it more often now. One of the most expensive drugs you can get. That treatment cost her $1,200 per treatment. $1,200 per treatment. And I'm going to quote him here. Excuse me, I'm a little bit sick. He says, as you can see, in the most extreme cases, cancer treatment might cost you as much as the price of a used car. If you include the cost of surgery, remember, in the hospital, Part A, $1,200 right up front, radiation treatments, 20%, no limit, and several courses of chemotherapy, that's each with a biologic agent. However, when I say used car, I mean the price of a used Ford Taurus or Honda Civic, not a luxury vehicle. That's the most extreme expense you might possibly be hit with if you only have Part A and Part B. Should you get a supplemental policy to cover these costs? That's obviously your call, but now that you know the potential risk, let's talk about these policies. Now, this is a doctor talking about insurance. Same thing as me talking about a laparoscopic cholecystectomy, how to perform that under anesthesia, right? No business talking about it whatsoever. But anyway, let's go on. He said, several of my patients with supplemental plans tell me, this is called anecdotal evidence. Anyway, several of my patients with supplemental plans tell me that they pay between $200 and $250 per person per month. Let me tell you from a 20-year experienced agent, that's the top end of what someone would pay for a Medicare supplement. Maybe you're in geriatrics and your patients are 85 years old, but most of my patients are paying around $100, maybe $120 for their Medicare supplement. So to pick and choose your anecdotal evidence on the very high end and say they're paying $250 each per person, one can easily find out that that's not the case by looking at any Medicare Supplement quote engine or by giving us a call, since we're completely independent and don't care which way you go as long as you have the best rate. So several of his patients say that they're paying $250 a month. How about the vast majority? See, it's the vast majority of people that I would be more interested in that are paying way less than $250 a month. I don't know what this doctor's agenda is to tell seniors that are on a fixed income that they shouldn't have insurance, but he probably should stand on the street corner and tell all the drivers driving by in their brand new cars that they don't need insurance either. Because the same fact remains. If they wrap their car around a telephone pole, no matter whose fault it is, they're either going to pay for the replacement of a whole new car or they enjoy the safety and security brought by an insurance policy. See, that's what insurance is for. It's the law of large numbers. It's the spreading of risk, of your own risk, among a whole bunch of other policyholders so that you don't have to have that huge out-of-pocket tab. And doctor, you may not think that the buying of a new car or the buying of a used car is a big deal for a senior on a fixed income at $1,200 a month, but I'm here to tell you it is a very big deal for a senior to get a $2,000 bill per treatment. And like I already mentioned, the supplement's the only thing that's going to pay for any care if you go outside the United States, or if you're traveling down the road and you think you have a Medicare Advantage plan that's going to cover the cost, you'd be in the same predicament here, with the Medicare Advantage plans only paying 80% of the chemotherapy cost. So look very carefully at your schedule of benefits. But doctor, I don't know what your agenda is, but it's totally off base when you're dealing with seniors who are on a fixed income and count on people like me, professionals in the insurance industry, to give them honest advice of what their options are. I think really, with all due respect, you should stay back in working on patients rather than diagnosing a prescription plan that involves insurance, because you're outside your scope of expertise. My name is Chris Westfall. I'm an independent insurance broker. Would love to help any senior to look at the entire market and see what their options are. My phone number is listed below. Thanks for your time.